My name is Franklin, and I'm an atheist.
How would you know at all if you're being accurate?
I've read a lot about religion.
What exactly does through Jesus Christ mean?
What is it about their religion that resonates with who they are? It's not an anthropomorphic being. Is there an enemy? How does their religion make them a better person?
Can you explain to me and anybody who doesn't know what a mitzvah is?
What do they think is missing about how we understand the world?
What would be the difference between praying on a subject and just thinking on a subject?
Why don't people have superpowers anymore?
I think it's important to talk to them and find out what they believe. Today I'm speaking with Michael Card, who's a guest teacher at the Belmont Church. So I've got my steak and I've got my garlic, and he's going to teach me how to kill some vampires.
Franklin, this has nothing to do with video games.
Oh. All right, well, let's just talk about Christianity. Michael Card is a Christian teacher. He's authored or co-authored 21 books. He's also a musician who's sold over 4 million albums. Here's a little of his best music. Okay, find it on your own. Mr. Card's music is available in most places you can find Christian music. Better yet, check out michaelcard.com. Before I get to the interview, I must apologize for the video quality. Michael lives in a rural area, so sometimes the video freezes a bit. Hello and welcome to the What They Believe series. Today I'll be speaking with author, musician, and Christian teacher, Michael Card. Michael, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, we actually had a little bit of this conversation, but I see that you're a non-denominational Christian, or perhaps an evangelical Christian, although you may not like that label. How would you describe yourself as a Christian?
Well, I like what C.S. Lewis wrote a book called Mere Christianity, and just the most basic, simple definition of what that means to be a follower of Jesus. And that's what I've been working towards, my whole life. I've been in 3 or 4 different denominations. I've done things with Catholics. I've done things with Adventists, and it ends up making everybody mad. And I think that's an indication of the problem. I think Lewis was right. I think what we should all be shooting for is just mere Christianity. No tags.
As an outsider, there are several parts of Christianity, or to be fair, Christian people, that I find bizarre. In this instance, I'm speaking about the controversy over your album, Brother to Brother. Can you explain this controversy?
I mean, that relates back to what we were just talking about. John Michael Talbot is a person who I had admired for a long time. He's this quirky genius. He's one of the greatest banjo players in the world, and an unbelievable musician. And he is an Orthodox Catholic. I mean, he's a monk. He's married to a nun, which is fairly unorthodox, but he is pretty much right in the middle of Catholicism. He does not worship Mary, as far as I understand. But anyway, I'd admired him for so long and loved his music for so long, and really loved him because, again, he's this quirky, wonderful guy. It was my idea. I said, I want to record 5 of my favorite songs of yours. And then I don't think he had 5 favorite songs of mine, but I said that you could do 5 of mine, and we'll do this thing together, and we'll call it Brother to Brother. And we'll try to show the world that despite, these denominational differences, I think I was going to a Presbyterian church. I was at that point. And we'll just do this. And John was very candid. He goes, I won't get in trouble for doing this, but you will. You're gonna pay a big price for this. And I said, it's 1990, we're past those days. And he was absolutely right. There are Christian radio stations that won't play any of my music, not just the music I did with John. There are Christian bookstores that won't sell any of my books or records because of that one thing. They saw it as a betrayal, and I guess I can sort of understand it, but things that aren't fundamental, I won't even argue with you about. I used to smuggle Bibles into China. We developed what we call bullet theology. And the question is, what will you take a bullet for? Divinity of Jesus, efficacy of the cross, the importance of Scripture. Those things I'll take a bullet for. Baptism, immersion, or sprinkling. I won't take a bullet for that. And if I won't take a bullet for it, I won't even argue about it, because I don't think it's worth that, the time. But he is a genius. He is a genius. He's read everything, and again, one of the greatest banjo players in the world. I got to play the banjo with John Michael Talbot. That was sort of my dream come true.
I would have thought that the title of the album and even the title of the first track would kind of make everybody understand what the message here was.
I found it bizarre. I mean, I was kind of expecting it, but not to the degree that it came. To a degree, it's blown over since then. But there's still very, kind of rigid people that, there's a strong, and John warned me, he goes, the anti-Catholic feeling in the evangelical church is a lot stronger than you think. And he was right, but a lot of it's blown over since then. I mean, that was several years ago. I must say, he is really a more faithful friend than I am. He's the one, he calls me to see how how I'm doing, and checks in every now and then. He's just a sweet guy.
You are deeply involved in your community. You believe strongly in your faith. You study the scriptures, and you teach others about Christianity. However, you are not a pastor. Why have you never chosen that path?
Well, both my grandfathers were pastors, and I grew up with sort of a mystical reverence for pastors, and the church that I grew up in, I don't think pastors are revered the way they used to be, but I had tremendous respect for a pastor. I mean, he's the guy who, marries you and buries you, and when your baby, you have a baby, you call him and he comes to the hospital. I mean, he's that guy who, if you're ingrained in a church, if you're in trouble or if you're joyful or whatever, he's the guy. And just since I've just been a teaching pastor for about the last 10 weeks, and it is wearing me out. I do not see how the people that are pastors, how they do it. It's a tremendous burden. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard. Because not only do you teach, but then people have a right to come to you with questions and problems and things like that. And I'm not a counselor. I love people. I find people fascinating, but I just don't have that gift. And Bonhoeffer is one of my favorite people. And Bonhoeffer said the call makes everything possible. And it's really simple. I'm just not called to do that. My gift is really, engaging with scripture and writing songs about it, and teaching a little bit, although I struggle with that. That's what I'm gifted at doing. But to be a counselor and
Sometimes we hear the term playing God, such as with genetic engineering or the Three Gorges Dam in China. But is that even possible? Would God allow us to invent something that let us do what God does?
What about a defibrillator? We invent things that start people's hearts again. Miracle drugs. Yeah, I think to an extent, we aren't, never will be, can't be transcendent, but yeah, I think flying an airplane, I mean, that's a fairly godlike thing to get in the Concorde and be in Paris in 3 hours. Of course, God is in New York and Paris at the same time, so it's not quite being godlike. But I do think we are allowed to participate in some things that are pretty miraculous. But when it comes to that line of transcendence, absolutely not. My father was a doctor, and he was a cardiologist, and he hated surgeons because they thought they were like God. In his mind, I have friends who are surgeons. In his mind, they thought they were God, and you do what surgeons do over a number of years, and I can see how you kind of feel like God. Hold someone's heart in your hand and squeeze it and get it beating again. Hey, that's a pretty cool trick. So, yeah, I think we're allowed to participate and do things, but we are certainly can't be transcendent in the way that God is.
You use music as an expression of your faith. What is part of the process when you're writing a new composition?
Yeah, I look at music as a vehicle, and I have friends who love to write and play music. Phil Kagi is a guitarist, really well-known guitarist, and right now I can tell you what Phil Kagi's doing. He's eating or sleeping or playing the guitar because that's all he ever does. Okay, I'm not that guy. I love music as a vehicle, and there's a part of music, if I'm in the right place, that really moves me. But and with a little bit, I'm a little embarrassed to say, but I'm somewhat utilitarian. Music is a vehicle for me, and it should be beautiful and it should be appropriate to the lyric and that sort of thing. But I don't just relish sitting around and playing the guitar. I mean, yeah, I've never been that guy, and all of my friends are like that. But writing songs is a hard thing. I think it's somewhat like giving birth. And insofar as it's like that, it's a painful thing. I don't like doing it. Finding the right words is it can be an agonizing thing. And then finishing it and feeling like, well, I mean, I listen to my records and all I hear are the mistakes. All I hear are, oh, they should have got a better word than that. And songwriting, I know people who love writing songs. I don't really enjoy writing songs. I get excited about the idea that the particular song's about. And I think in a somewhat utilitarian way, I can communicate this and get people excited if I write a song about this. And if I say it in just an obtuse, peculiar enough way that they'll go, I wrote a song called God's Own Fool, and got in big trouble for that because you're not supposed to call your brother a fool, and that's a whole other thing. But I just think that's a really interesting idea. Paul talks about the foolishness, of what he believes and that kind of thing. And so I got excited about the idea, and I hammered out a melody and put the words together, and that tends to be, what it is for me. I wish I was better at it. I think I'm probably done. I think I've probably written the last song I'll ever write, unless some idea really captures me again. But I've written 450 songs, and I think that's enough. I'm 63, so yeah.
I find angels to be terrifying. I've read the Bible myself, and I know that the concept of personal guardian angels is never mentioned, nor are female angels. And in Isaiah 37:36, an angel personally kills 185,000 enemy soldiers. Can you explain your view on angels?
Yeah, I mean, what about Sodom and Gomorrah, right? Those two angels, I mean, they wiped the whole city out. I like on Jesus on the cross says he has 12 legions of angels. That's like 78,000 angels that he can command. Of course, he doesn't. He dies. He doesn't call them in. He could have, if you think, that two angels flatten, two cities. So yeah, I think they are scary. I think they're really powerful. I think the Bible purposely is sort of vague about angels. Sometimes they appear and they look like a person. I know John in Revelation, at the end of Revelation, John sees one and he falls down and worships it. And the angel goes, don't do that. I'm just a servant like you. There are only, I think, two angels that are, Gabriel and Michael are two that are named. They seem to have specific roles, which is interesting. Gabriel announces things. He's a messenger. And Michael seems to be a person that, leads armies of angels. I would love to see one. I would love to see one. But again, I do think the Bible is purposely vague. Paul mentions people that worship angels as well. The worship of angels at one point he says, and like I said in Revelation 22, John worships one. And there's a whole field of theology called angelology. But I'm like you. I'm fascinated by them. And I don't think there's anything wrong with studying them, but I do think if we could see them, we'd be tempted to worship them because they're so beautiful. They're described as being really beautiful. We know that Satan was an angel. Lucifer, right, was an angel who betrayed or fell. Yeah, I'd like to know more, but I'm not so sure the Bible wants me to know more, because I'd fall off into that hole really quickly, because they are fascinating. The power.
I always heard people, like their grandmother dies and she's she's an angel in heaven now, and I'm like, no, that's not how it works.
No, yeah, yeah, and that's one of those common sort of inane things that people say in the church. Oh yeah, he's an angel now, or he'll get he died. He'll get his wings now. It's like, dude, they're completely different, separated order of created beings. Angels are, and no, yeah, don't get me started on those kinds of misunderstandings. But again, I think Jesus saying, I could call 12 legions, and legion is a 6 to 9,000 or something. It's a floating term. Legion meant different numbers to different emperors. You think, wow, what kind of power? Like an atomic bomb would be like a tiny little firecracker, in terms of the kind of power that they would have. And yeah, I wish I knew more about angels too.
In Genesis, when Adam was the only human, God tells him not to eat from or even to touch the tree of knowledge, or he will surely die. Later, the serpent informs Eve that they will not die, they will instead become aware of good and evil. Adam and Eve do eat the fruit and do not die. Was the serpent right?
Well, there's two trees, right? There's a tree that live forever, and then there's the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and that's the one they eat. Yeah, and that's when they realize they're naked, and they all of a sudden they see things, and then God stops them from eating the tree of life, because then they'll live forever, and that's going to open a whole new can of worms. When I think of that passage, I'm a Southerner, and we tend to boil things down. To me, I read that and I say, I can't not do one thing. Okay, they're in the garden. They've got everything, right? No aches and pains, no diseases, as far as I know. And God says, okay, there's one thing I want you to do. See that tree? Don't eat that fruit. And they can't not do one thing. I mean, that's to me is what I see. And Satan always twists things a little bit. God said, don't touch it. I don't think God said you can't touch it. I think he said you can't eat from it. But I think there's lots of ways to unpack that story. But in my simple mind, I see this reflection of, human nature. And you see this if you have kids, you say, okay, don't, you can play with every toy in here, but don't play with that because that's your sister's. Well, what are they going to do? They're going to do that one thing.
In Matthew 28:19, it appears to be the only time the Holy Trinity is specifically named in the Bible. Can you explain the Trinity?
Wow. No, I can't explain. I think it's hinted at, and it's Jesus will. I think there's one prayer. I can't remember which one it is. Maybe the prayer at the end of John, where he'll talk about the Spirit and he'll talk about the Father, and he, I and you, and you and me, and them and us, and so I think it's. I know there are people that disagree with the idea of the Trinity. Again, I think it's God revealing himself to us in a way that can be expressed and contained in language. I just think we don't have the language to express or even the minds to understand who God is and what he means and that sort of thing. And so it's like Jesus talking to Nicodemus in John. I love that story. Jesus talks about the wind. They're talking about the Spirit, right? And Jesus says, well, it's like the wind. You see what it does, but you don't know where it's come from, and you don't know where it's going. Well, that's a very simple image, but it's got to be simple for us to understand it. So, yeah, I think you got, God who reveals himself way back in Exodus as a father type person. He revealed up to Moses as a father. Okay, so I get that. Then there's this expression of him that's a spirit that affects things and fills people and does things. Okay, so that's not the part of him that sits on the throne that if I look at him he dies. So there's this aspect of him that's a spirit. But then for someone like me, the most tangible and understandable, I think that's what the incarnation was about, to make this all understandable.
I'd like to thank Michael Card for being on the show, and I'll do it right now. Thank you, Michael.
Thanks, Franklin. It's been fun talking to you.
I'm always wary of the term, "it's just a joke." In 1887, Susanna Salter was eager to exercise her brand new right to vote. This was about 70 years before the 19th Amendment. However, in Kansas, women could now vote in local elections. Upon arriving to her polling place, she discovered something surprising. She was running for mayor of Argonia, Kansas. A group of nefarious men who were against women participating in politics and Miss Salter's involvement in it added her name as a joke. The plan was to humiliate Miss Salter with a devastating loss. That plan failed. Susanna Salter was elected mayor of Argonia, Kansas, and was the first female mayor. She was the first female elected official of any kind in the United States. I'm sure those who were against women's suffrage were not comforted by the pleas of those nefarious men saying it was just a joke. If you look at the photos on my producer's phone, you will see that there are a little over 340 pictures of animals and 0 pictures of friends. For the record, my producer does have friends. This feels like a recent phenomenon on how we look after our pets. Did you know that you can get antidepressants for your dog? Or that you can buy health insurance to cover a pet's medical costs? Does that mean that humanity can't get its priorities straight? Probably not. We always hear that cats were worshipped in ancient Egypt, but the Egyptians revered dogs too, giving them names like Reliable, Northwind, Blackie, and my favorite, Useless. When a dog died in the household, all the members of the family would mourn the death by shaving their whole body and burying the dogs in designated dog burial grounds. In ancient Rome, people created headstones for their dogs and buried them along roads. It makes sense. Humans would never have been able to domesticate dogs and cats if we didn't have the instant desire to make friends with them. And when our friends die, we mourn them. I'll close with an epitaph for a dog from almost 3,000 years ago. I am in tears while carrying you to your last resting place, as much as I rejoiced when bringing you home in my hands 15 years ago. Thanks for watching, and may the road rise with you.
Spend all the time saying what you're not. Unfortunately, there's so many different flavors of Christianity, and that's regrettable because it's confusing to me.